Hello and welcome to Crux Investor. We're caught up today with Mike Young, MD and CEO at Vimy Resources, Uranium junior developer with assets in Western Australia. We catch up with them with regards to licensing, permitting and the like. Obviously, they've raised $18.5 million recently, plus they're doing a share purchase plan, which hopefully adds another $3 million to the coffers. That gives them some optionality and the luxury of time. So if you want our thoughts and opinions on the conversation, the company's plans, the company itself, and indeed Mike, you can find that at cruxinvestor.com/club, where you can also find detailed company reports and analysis. We've got commentary from experts from around the world on a bunch of companies and commodities, including our weekly uranium show. That's really fascinating. We've also got training courses on there, and we do summaries of all the interviews that we do just to save you some time, because we know you are busy people. But most excitingly of all, there's a wonderful, thriving community of investors sharing their thoughts and ideas with each other in a nice, friendly and safe environment. And if that sounds nice to you, and I hope it does, because there's none of that judgment, trolling and abuse you see elsewhere, go and join them. cruxinvestor.com/club. There's a bit of a waiting list, but it's well worth the wait. So cruxinvestor.com/club. And we'd love your feedback too. So give us a like, leave your comments below. And if you want to see precisely what we talked about today, do take a look in the description below. Mike, how you doing, sir?
Very well. It's good to see you again, finally, after all this time.
Well, I'm just glad you're alive, Mike. I heard you had a bit of a fall, bit of a face plant.
I did a Christmas present to myself. I was down south and just typically riding in the hills and going down a hill and then going up the other side, sprinting very hard. And the chain slipped. And of course, when your chain disappears, you go forward. And I went forward and went from 50 kilometers an hour to zero on my face. So fortunately, I didn't sustain any structural damage, just a bit of bark off my nose, my chin, my lip, made me look more rugged. And I got a new bike out of the deal. So, silver lining kind of guy. It was a positive outcome in the end, but yeah, it certainly paid for it.
Well, luckily the ground broke your fall, eh?
Yes, well, it's a good thing. Yeah, and I was wearing a helmet. So you kiddies out there, you just make sure you wear a helmet when you ride your bike.
Very good. Very good. I agree with that. I'm getting into cycling myself, so I need all the tips I can get. So bike, don't let your chain get wrapped around the gears, and wear a helmet. Good.
Yeah, and maintenance, bike maintenance is the key thing. And it's a good sport. It's keeps you fit. There's a lot of camaraderie. It's good for your head. When you're not landing on it, but it's good for your mental health as well. The endorphins, they're just, you get addicted to them, and as you go on, you'll find you'll start saying, well, I'm going to do a 60K ride, and I'm going to do a 100K ride, and then I'm going to do 160 because that's 100 miles. And then you're doing cyclosportives with friends. And then the next thing, when COVID lifts, I envy you because you are in outside of London, but you've got access to Europe, within a half a day's travel, you're in some of the best riding spots in the world, and you're in the same time zone as the races and watching them. You're in cycling central, and there's
France and Italy is where you want to be. They've got the weather, they've got the roads, got the support, and people don't drive like lunatics near bikes like they do here.
There's a lot more respect for cyclists in those countries because they grew up with cycling, and cycling used to be their transportation. There's an interesting show I saw on TV not long ago. It was the Morris Minor. I think that was like your first British-built
used to have
car
one.
that was built
used to have one
en masse.
Yeah.
Well, that was the end of cycling. Raleigh Cycles used to be one of the biggest companies in the world. Cycling was how people got around back in the day, and then they invented a cheap car. So
we all had a Raleigh.
Maybe cycles will come back, and everyone has to buy EVs because they're so bloody expensive. So, and you got e-bikes now, right? And they're just fantastic. So the number of people I see out cycling who otherwise wouldn't be has just been great.
E-bikes are awesome. I actually used one when I was in Sydney. It's just wonderful, but cheating. It's the purists would hate us for it. But we shouldn't talk about bikes because having got into it, I agree with you. You kind of get sucked into that world, and there's lots of moving parts, literally, that you want to sort of try and understand. We should try and talk about uranium though today. Should we do that? I think your shareholders would be quite pleased if we did.
Absolutely. And I think an e-bike is only as clean as the power used to charge it. And if you're using nuclear power, then it's a clean vehicle, right?
I like the idea of a nuclear charged e-bike. Sounds good, doesn't it?
You go faster.
You get a lot faster to the moon and back. Right, uranium. Why don't we kick off first? Give us a 1 minute overview, just an update, because we haven't spoken since September, That's a long time.
Yeah. Obviously the market's changed a lot. We just finished an $18.5 million placement. We've got a $3 million SPP out there, which by the time this goes to air will have closed and, really oversubscribed. We're moving towards early works on the project in the second half of this year. We've done a lot of work in the background with Mulga Rock. We've looked at some of the processes, the ion exchange inside the metallurgical plant. We've done some work on that. But by and large, it's about pushing the project forward. And Scott Hyman in America and I have spent a long time on the phone with utilities. We know they're still sitting on the sidelines, but I think it's really important to keep them abreast of where we're at, what our potential timeline could be to production, so that they can start putting that into their calculations. Because, in reality, there aren't that many new mines out there as a result of the long drought that we've just had. So that's Mulga Rock. And then with ARP, we last field season, because of COVID, we couldn't get rigs up there. We barely got people up into the bush because the lockdowns here ended in around July or August. And so we were able to do a small field season. We got multiple drilling targets up there. But again, we've done some test work in the background, so we just haven't been sitting back doing nothing. We would like to get some rigs up there this year, but with the gold boom, copper boom, nickel boom, lithium boom, all the booms going on in Western Australia, that might be difficult this year. Companies are still reluctant to cross borders because of COVID. So each of the states have their own lockdowns. So you could have a drill rig up in the Northern Territory, and suddenly you have a case in WA, and they might have a 2-week, 4-week lockdown, and suddenly the guys up in the Northern Territory are trapped. So, crossing state boundaries in Australia is still a little bit fraught. So we're not really 100% sure if we're going to get drilling done up in the Alligator River this year. And then we have a tenement block directly northeast of Mulga Rock under a company called Velo that has the potential for base metals. And so we may do some work on that this year. Certainly we want to do some airborne geophysics and generate some targets. That's 150 kilometers of tenements in an area that's never been explored. And then, of course, talking about base metals, earlier this calendar year, we released some results from ongoing base metal studies at Mulga Rock, and current base metal prices at, I think copper is over $10,000 a ton now. The base metals at Mulga Rock certainly can defray some of the costs between $4 and $5. So that's something we're looking at as well. So we've been busy, even though the market's been pretty static, we've kept the guys going and kept working on marginally improving each of the projects, rather than just sitting and letting them gather dust.
But that's the key word, isn't it? It's been fairly marginal, because you haven't, until you did this raise, had much cash to do anything. It was a case of conservation, so waiting for the timing. I think we can agree, since the beginning of the year, the timing element is working for you. The market's doing the heavy lifting for you. I think when we spoke in September, you're at 4 cents. You're up to what, 16.5 today, 17, something like that?
Yeah, 16.5 touched. I think we touched 18 at one point today. So, we're as the tide comes in, all the boats are rising. We've had, our share price has appreciated more than most. We've been, I've been busy getting the message out. We've always been on message. We've never veered from the message. And there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of good companies out there, and I think as we saw with the recent spate of raisings, Paladin was raising several $100 million. Banner and Boss, all of our peers are raising money, and there's plenty out there. I mean, our raise was oversubscribed, as was everyone else's. And I think we've seen several false dawns. I think this one is sustainable.
Right. So let's talk about what you told the market then, because you have seen tremendous growth 4 times, right, from a very low base, admittedly, right? So what did you go and say to the market, and what did they react to? Well, give me some money because I'm going to go and do what?
Yeah, so I think one of the things we've got is we've got a full DFS on the Mulga Rock project with all of our licenses, so all of our mining licenses. So it's all of the tenure is there. That's a key thing. Having done the DFS, we've got the metrics we can speak to. We don't shy away from the fact that $55 is the price that excites us. We certainly do want to have a 5 in front of it. One of the things we did talk about when raising the money was when you talk about the use of funds. It was about having enough money in your working capital that you can be strategic about your contracting. So when you have a stressed balance sheet, you may be tempted to go out and get the first contract that comes along. And those contracts will, right now, they're in the 3s, they'll come into the 4s, they'll come into the 5s. So, when they're in the 4s, the NPV break even for Mulga Rock is 36. So if you're at 46, 48, you might look at it and go, well, actually, we can write a contract and make some money. But you want to write a contract because you want to announce it. And so that then gives you share price appreciation so you can raise money. Now that we've raised this money, we do have working capital that allows us to be more strategic about the contracts. And, right now, it's probably fair to say we won't sign a contract unless it has a 5 in front of it. So that stress has gone away, and it means that we can be more strategic. Now, if you had listened to, as you said, you did the Cameco quarterly call, and I really recommend your listeners listen to that every quarter because it is an absolute amazing source of intel. Those guys said much the same thing. There's no point mining an asset at a low price, and now with that raise, it allows us to do that. Now we also want to do some early works up in Mulga Rock. So we have a ministerial approval called a Ministerial Statement 1046. If your listeners want to look it up, and one of the conditions was to have commenced work within 5 years. So our intention is to start significant early works on the project in the second half of this year. So that'll be part of the use of funds. Want to do some work on Alligator. Haven't decided what that'll look like yet because of drill rig availability. And then we want to do some work, as I said, on Velo. So there's a program of work to do. But certainly we want to ensure that we have enough working capital to be very strategic about contracts.
So talking about 5 years from when?
December 16th of this year.
5 years starting from December 16th?
No, sorry. So December 16th, 2016 was when the ministerial approval was granted. And that had several conditions in it. We had to do the conditional environmental management plans. I think there were 8 of them. And then clause 3 of that particular ministerial statement says that you have to have commenced work on the project within 5 years. And then you write us a letter and tell us you've commenced, and that's the condition. So we intend on meeting that condition, and that'll be all of our ministerial conditions done.
So that's a case of just in time then?
6 months, So, but, that's all in train. We've got, here's the minutes from yet another meeting for the early works. So we've got a mining engineer who worked with us during the DFS. He's consulting, and he's come back. Tony Chamberlain, one of our directors, was our previous COO. He's involved in the process. So it's a matter of getting on site and starting early works on site, and that's certainly what we'll certainly do it. It's just a matter of whether we start in July or August.
Okay, so let's go with it, because I think this is the big talking point for people. Like, you obviously, gone and raised some money, so the market is positive about what you're saying. But at the same time, like I say, you've kind of left it to kind of the last 6 months of the 5-year term to kind of get going, because now you've got the money to be able to do it. So the conditions are based on, one of the main conditions is substantive work. How is that qualified? Who qualifies it? How do you know if you are going to be able to deliver substantive work? What's it mean?
We do. We determine what it is.
Was it 1 million or 10 million?
1 million or $10 million?
Yeah.
It's area cleared.
Okay.
So the ministerial statement is about environmental disturbance. So it's about the area cleared, but there's nothing in the ministerial statement that defines what the substantial works are. So basically, the condition is that we write a letter showing evidence that we've started substantial works. And I can assure you that the work that we're going to do is certainly substantial. It's not about going down, it's about going up. And there's a lot of work to do. I mean, and importantly, Matt, this is all work that we had prescribed in our DFS. So this is improving the roads, clearing the airstrip, clearing the site for the camp. clearing the site for one of our communications towers, which is something we have to do quite early in the process, and then commencing the clearing and topsoil removal of the first pit that we plan to mine. So that's a lot of work. And then what happens is sometime in that period, we write to the department that will say, hey, we've started, and that's the condition met.
Okay. And that's the only condition as far as you're concerned that you need to meet. So Western Australia is saying to you, we want another uranium mine.
Yes, that's right. That's the only condition. That's the last condition in that ministerial approval that we have to meet. Yep.
Okay. Because I saw you put out an announcement about an environmental management plan, which is, I think Julian possibly managed for you.
Yep.
That is approved, done. That's all good.
Yeah. So there were 8 of them, and they had to do with Aboriginal heritage. They had to do with water, air, groundwater, and then the last one, which we actually you might find this amusing because your country invented Yes Minister. So the last one that we had to do was a conditional environmental management plan for an above ground tailings facility. Now, we had planned to do one way back in the pre-feasibility study, but when we did the definitive feasibility study, we decided that we wanted all the tailings to be below ground because tailings management is really, really important. And particularly what happened in Brazil and what you saw recently in Florida with that phosphate mine, tailings management is really critical. So we want to put all our tailings below ground, which is what we intend on doing. So, we wrote to the government and said, well, look, we're not building that above ground tailings facility. So we don't see the need to do an environmental management plan for a tailings facility that we won't build. But they said, no, it's one of the conditions of your ministerial statement. You have to do a management plan for it. And we went, okay, then. But it was a bit frustrating because, the government, the bureaucrats in the departments are really overworked. There's so much going on in Western Australia. We felt that they would just say, look, that's fine. You're not doing it. We'll just make a note. But look, to their credit, they are being very good about ensuring that the approvals are, watertight, because obviously, every mining project anywhere in the world now has people who are opposed to it and, trying to have a crack legally. So what they're doing is they're actually helping us make sure that the approvals, really watertight. And look, we respect that and we get that. And we went through the process and, we got that last management plan for the tailings dam we won't build.
Brilliant. It is good. It is. Hello, Minister. Very much so. You're still outstanding mining proposal. So basically, the mining plan needs to be agreed.
Yeah. So there's the works approval, which we need when we get into the ore body. The mining proposal, project management plan, which is safety, mine closure plan, and those are all in train. And those are not ministerial approvals; those are departmental approvals. And the guys are sending back the last load of, so they ask you lots of questions and, how are you doing this and how are you doing this? Can you explain this? And that process is ongoing. So they'll be done, we're thinking probably by the end of June, they should be finished.
So how does this marry up with regards to what the politicians are saying? So politicians don't seem very pro uranium mining, but you're going through a kind of, I guess, fairly rigorous process here, and it seems to be advancing. You seem to be getting the things that you want to do. We've spoken with Julian in the past, and he's explained that it is just a process. Do you think the politicians will step in and stop this from ever being a mine? Or is it a case of if you go through the hoops that you're meant to go through, you'll get it over the line?
That's a really good question, Matt, and I know it's one we get a lot. No, I don't think they will for a couple of reasons. So you've got to remember that there were 4 mines in Western Australia that were approved prior to March 2017. That was when the current Labor government was elected. So when they came into office, they spent a long time through the Office of the State Solicitor looking at the legal position about these ministerial statements that had been granted. And they had been granted to Toro for Lakeway, Kintyre, which is Cameco, Yeelirrie, and ourselves. And, as it turns out, we're going to be the only one to have met the condition to start within 5 years. But they were quite adamant that we had the right to move forward, and this was in the release that the minister made, that the government could not use the secondary approvals process to frustrate our project. And that is legal advice from the Office of the State Solicitor.
Okay, so there's nothing that they will try to do to delay this and frustrate your ability to move this forward, as far as you're concerned?
No, we don't believe so. And it's one thing to sort of believe that, but Julian, when we were, as you say, back in September, we didn't have much money and the share price was 4 cents. We were doing a lot of cash preservation. And one of the things was Julian was working part-time. Now, he had another job with another company in Western Australia that was developing a potash mine. And he said that the frustration that we were seeing in the approvals were even worse for that than they were for us. So, and this came, from other companies that we dealt with in gold and lithium and various other things. Everyone is finding that the approvals process is very slow. And part of the problem is that the people inside the mines departments are being offered silly amounts of money to go work for BHP and Rio. And then, of course, they've got to bring new people in and you've got to get them trained up. We've been very lucky in that we've got a really good case officer working with us and he understands the project, got a good relationship with Julian and Paula Arthur, who's our environmental engineer. So when we look at the process that's been going on, we actually see that we're not being treated any differently. And we're on the lookout for that because while the minister is not allowed in our system, and I think your system too, he's not allowed to actually go down below what's called the Director General of his department, the CEO of his department. But, we're not naive. We know that if there's a minister who is, dead against uranium mining, they may just try and slow us down a bit to make the minister happy. But as it turned out after the last election, which occurred this year, that Minister of the Environment's been replaced by a lady who came from the hospital unions. They're pro, they use nuclear medicine. She's not known to be anti-nuclear. The Premier is not anti-nuclear. The Mines Minister is not anti-nuclear. So most of the leadership group aren't anti-nuclear. There's, as with all these things, sort of a fringe element of the left who happened to get that policy up because there was no point back then fighting it. But what's happened globally is, as we were talking about, and I'm sure you talk on your show, there's been a huge sea change globally. And it really started with the election of Joe Biden in the States. And when you look at, when all these, I was looking at the chart earlier before we came to air. When you look at when did all the equities take off? Well, it was December 3rd. And what happened on December 3rd? There was that bipartisan bill came out of a Senate committee in the States saying we need to support nuclear power in America. We need to put money into buying uranium. We need to put money into getting, Metropolis up and running again because we're being outpaced by the Chinese and the Russians. So we need to do something. And now you're seeing more and more of that coming out of the States from Biden and Kerry. And that was where the equities took off because remember, the price hasn't gone up yet. The price has not moved yet. The equities, the tides come in on the equities. So I always joke that we're going to have a uranium boom, but I'm not sure that's a great metaphor for uranium. But we've had that first, yeah, that's right. We've had the first one, which is the equities boom, and we've yet to see the price boom. So, you can sheet it all home to that event. Trump was never anti-nuclear, but nobody really knew what he stood for. Whereas Biden, he's a professional politician. He understands the power of policy. So, I think, when you've got people who have been anti-nuclear all their lives coming out saying, well, look, we need to look at nuclear because we are in a climate emergency. Doesn't matter what you think about that as a scientist. What matters is that policymakers now accept that we need to do something, and nuclear has become a big part of the discussion.
I agree with you. We talk about it on our weekly uranium show. Lots of positive moves, lots of marketing going on. A lot of the junior equities have moved significantly, since the beginning of the year, which is all fantastic. But I want to stick local though, because again, so Western Australia has had this history of being sort of anti-uranium mining. You're saying now that the politicians that are now in place, the civil servants that are now in place, are pro-uranium mining in Western Australia. That's what you're telling me. So have you got an idea of when these remaining licenses that you will need to get started will be given to you?
So a couple of things. I wouldn't say the West Australian government is pro-nuclear now. What I would say is they're less anti-nuclear. So It's quite a fine line.
I know, but that was my point. What's going on? Because if I look at Germany, they're anti-nuclear. There's a stance, but it doesn't matter what's happening in the States. So I'm mentioning what's happening in Western Australia. What is their position? It's less anti-nuclear. Okay, that's good.
Well, let's put it this way. In Germany, the leaders are ideologically anti-nuclear. In Western Australia, the leaders are not ideologically anti-nuclear. You have a small fringe who happen to get a policy up at a Labor love-in before an election, but the policy that they have was brought to the party by the then leader of the opposition, who is now the Premier, Mark McGowan. So what I'm saying to you about the Globe and the Democrats is that I think that's going to filter through. But what I can tell you is that there is no sign within the government that they're going to, provided we meet our the conditions under that ministerial statement, there is absolutely no sign, have we seen, that they're going to stand in the way in any way.
Great. So coming back to the question on timing, when's it happening?
So the secondary approvals, which is the mines approval, we think June 30 is the date that we've sort of got in our schedule for that. Now, there is work that we can start on site without those approvals coming through. So if they're a month late, that's fine. We don't plan to be on site until July or August in any event. So we're very sure we'll have those approvals in time to start the early works that we intend on starting.
Okay, and what gives you that confidence?
Just the dialogue we have with the departments. So we're going through a process. So it's not a black box. You don't just send an application, wait for it to come back. It's a very iterative process. You send it in, they give you comments, you give comments, they give comments, and we're coming to the end of that process. We've done this often enough, and the other guys in the office have done this often enough that we know where we are in the process. We're coming down towards the end of it.
So you're coming to the end of the process, and so those people, the civil servants, they've told you you're going to get this. That's what they've said.
Well, there's actually a schedule that's legislated, so we know where we are in the schedule. There's you've got so many days to do your bit, they've got so many days to do their bit, so we can see the end.
Okay.
And that's as much information as we have, and so based on that, our feeling is that we'll have those approvals towards the end of June.
Right, and as you said at the beginning, this money that you've raised allows you to be more strategic, and by strategic I mean we can wait. It's fine. We've got the capital we need to move this project forward at the pace we determine.
That's with respect to marketing.
Well, it's respect to marketing, but it's also respect to you're not going to run out of cash. So if it does take a little bit longer, do you care?
Well, as long as we hit our target of late in the year, no, that's right, we don't.
Okay.
And you can get an awful lot done. You can get an awful lot done in a very short period of time. So, we've built a lot of safety into the timeline. And luckily, we've got a very good earth-moving contractor who have people available. That was one of the risks, but that risk is now gone because trying to hire people in Western Australia at the moment is very difficult. Just everyone's busy. So, we're lining the ducks up, and we expect to be underway and clearing well inside the timeline that we've set.
Okay. So, and given the number of ASX companies out there who have raised money in a similar position to you, why are people putting their money with you and not any of the other guys just on the ASX, let alone the Canadians and North Americans?
Well, they seem to be putting their money with everyone at the moment. I mean, when you look at the amount of money that's been raised on the ASX lately, it's been quite incredible. I think one of the things is we've been around for a long time. We've developed Mulga Rock. We do have, as I say, all of our tenures. So, we're lining up to get into production. There are a lot of companies that this happens every time there's a boom. They come out of the woodwork and then they, start saying, we've bought some ground, we're going to drill some holes. I mean, the difference is that we are going to be a miner. It's a matter of timing. Right now it looks like 2024 is probably when we'll be producing uranium. I've done it before. A lot of the guys on the team have done it before. So people know that what we're focused about is that ribbon cutting ceremony. In fact, I'll show you something.
I hope it's a ribbon.
If I can find them. I've already bought the scissors.
Fantastic. No expense spared.
And the young lad that's going to cut the ribbon was a field assistant who worked for the company long before I came on board. He's a New Zealander. And I said to him, he eventually ended up going back to New Zealand because he wanted to go home. And I said to Tim, in recognition of all the hard work you've done, I want you to be the guy cutting the ribbon. So that's how I think. That's how we think. And that's what we project to people. We're about getting into production, and right now we got a $150 million market cap. If we're in production, it's going to be 2-3 times that at least.
Okay, well, that's the big change psychologically here. So, I've given you the opportunity today to tell me it's going to be tough, it's going to be difficult, but we'll kind of get there. And you're saying to me, don't worry, everything's in hand. Going to get all the licenses, approvals, permits that we need to get this thing into production this year. It's all fine. That's the big kind of change in dialogue narrative from you from September.
Well, that's true. And I think what's unlocked that is just the way the market's changed, and our ability to raise money has been the difference. Now, we still would have had to do this, and we may have had to raise money in less good ways, with con notes and those sorts of things. It was something that we had to get done. And if we were still looking at a 25 million market cap, we would have had to look at alternate funding techniques. And, it wouldn't have been as good an outcome for shareholders, but it certainly would have been a better outcome than losing your license to operate. So it was always our intent to move forward. The last time we spoke, we were a year away from, instigating the program. But we certainly would have had to do this in some way. But I think, if things hadn't have improved on the equity side of things, it would have been a lot more stressful on the balance sheet.
Oh, for sure. I think the money can cover up a multitude of sins, for sure, but it also can free you up to do the things that you want to do. I mean, how are you feeling now? Because again, we spoke in September, we spoke earlier in the year last year. You were pretty stressed about this. The lights were on, but just. So what's going to change? Are you going to be as tight with your money going forward, or do you think, well, actually, no, now we've got it, let's go and spend it?
No, I think I'm going to stay on the salary sacrifice for lots of reasons. One is it's good use of the funds. It's not cash flow coming out. The other guys, it'll be there for an option for them. I mean, obviously, moving into early works, we do have to spend more money. But I think when you come out of several years of the smell of an oily rag, you don't suddenly jump into the new swimming pool. You kind of have it ingrained into your psyche, and I think it is other people's money after all, and so we will maintain that spend the what's the word I'm looking for,
frugal,
our discipline with our spending. I certainly going to stay on the salary sacrifice. The other guys will. Julian's coming back a bit more fuller time. He's not totally full time, but he's taking on new roles as the approvals wind down. We've got ESG is now becoming important. Aboriginal heritage is important. There's a lot of issues other issues that we need to be across, and certainly Julian's the guy to do that. Plus all the work he's doing with WNA in terms of nuclear advocacy. But we will stay disciplined on our spending for sure.
Okay.
But yes, I am in a better mood, Matt. And part of that is also the fact that my daughter has finished high school. That was very stressful for all of us at home. And she's now in university, and she's a much, much happier kid. And it probably wasn't something I could talk about last September, but we went through a really tough year with her last year. And, I didn't realize I was stressed, but you don't know it looking out. But certainly you picked up on it. And your personal life affects work affects your personal life. And my wife and I went through from September to December it was a really tough year. And now she's out of high school. She's just a different kid. And we're just so happy that she's happy,
I'm happy for you. I've got 2 daughters. I know exactly what you're talking about. It's not easy. Well, look, Mike, I appreciate the update. We haven't spent much time talking about the projects because, I don't think much has really changed on those. And if anyone wants to talk about the projects, listen to some of your other videos or listen to the last interview that we did. We'll put a link up. I was just wanted to kind of hone in on what are the things that could stop you from moving forward. You're saying there's nothing going to stop us. We've got the cash. We're going to get these licenses and permits. We're good to go. And the market, as you say, is raging.
It is. The link between now and actually pushing yellow cake out the door is contracts. And, this is a contract-led market. Funding will depend on contracts. And that's why we spend a lot of time and effort in the States, having Scott in the States, talking to utilities and understanding where they're at. But what's been really interesting, Matt, is the dialogue with the utilities is changing. Obviously, I can't give much away.
Give something away. Give something away. As in, they're talking to everyone. They always talk to everyone. They want to know what is the potential of pounds coming out of the ground and when. They do that with everyone, right? But give us some sense of, have they said to you when they're going to pull the trigger? People are speculating end of the year after WNA, October-ish sort of time, but do they need to?
That is one thing they will not tell you. What they will tell us is when there's been an RFP, what prices they've paid. They won't tell us who with, but we, having Scotty over there, he's got his ear to the ground, and we know where the pounds.
What are they paying?
To.
What are they paying? We know spot prices, but what are they paying?
That's our little secret. What I can tell you is
but it's a market thing. So
you still got a 3 in front of it, mate. You still got a 3 in front of it, right?
Of course it does.
There are people who are, there are people who are doing, and I'll tell you what, utilities, while on the one hand they're happy, on the other hand, they're absolutely scratching their heads. And we said to one of the guys, well, are you actually concerned you may not get those pounds? And they said, yes, but it was a small RFP. So, we talked to them about what did they think about, going to be producers. Notice I didn't say want to be. These are going to be producers buying uranium now. And the reaction was ambivalence. It was, we kind of get it. We'd rather see more producers than more traders, But what's important, Matt, is yes, they are talking to lots of people, but they're also very clever and they actually know where people are on the approvals and the DFS, BFS, tenure. They know where they are on that timeline. So, it's really important to us to say, well, look, guys, when you are talking to people, here's a checklist that you should be thinking about, right? Tenure, native title, approvals, timelines. And we spend a lot of time talking about that.
No, I know that, but they've got a better sense of it than some of the companies that we've spoken to, quite frankly, because they discount, they've been around the block and they know what's real and what's not. So I understand all of that. What the market is trying to get is how they will play this. When you've got entrants like Sprott and the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust, which I think goes public in about 4 or 5 weeks or so, that's going to change the marketing dynamic. We've seen the supply come out of the market, obviously due to COVID, which has been huge. Yep. And we know what the utilities inventory levels are like. The bit we don't understand is sort of this mobile inventory number around the world. But in your conversations, does it give you hope that they do have a sense of when they're going to need to come into market? And is it going to be this year, do you think? As in start doing more RFPs?
Well, obviously people are coming into the market this year. We've already seen that with Duke Energy with a couple of RFPs, some quick fire, rapid RFPs, but they're really looking for price discovery. And these guys, so the sense I get is they're now preparing themselves. We know that they're getting into the conversion and enrichment side of things, which they tend to do. They tend to do that first, and then they bring in the uranium last. The questions are getting more specific about timing in pounds. And I don't know the conversations we're having with other people. I don't know who they're talking to. I assume every CEO is trying to talk to them. But I just get the feeling that they give us a lot of credence on the dates and the times and the pounds that we're talking about. So there seems to be, it's almost as if when you're having these discussions, because you are doing it on Zoom, so at least you see some body language. The dialogue has changed since a year ago, since 6 months ago, in terms of the specifics about timing and pounds. How many pounds are you producing? What's your, obviously they know that we're going to have a spread of customers. Are you guys happy with 3 customers? Do you want 10 customers? Those are really specific questions I've never had before, and they're really quite interesting because they know that we do the same thing they do. They have, tranches of different customers. They layer everything in, and they expect us to do the same. So the questions they ask us are, how many customers you guys need to get your banking, and what price do you really need? And so it's been a different conversation than we've had before. Before it was high level, it was hi, how are you? Here's where we are. They're saying here's where we are. There's no real dialogue about specifics, but now we're starting to get into we're getting into numbers and dates, which is really interesting.
Right. Okay. I think they're being as obtuse as ever, I suspect.
Well, they are, and we I got to tell you, I know a few companies have marketing guys. Boss have Sashi, and she's absolutely amazing. She's great, and the Paladin boys have a can't remember the fellow's name at Paladin. A few of the guys do have marketing guys, but having those, and Duncan, and tell you the same thing. Having someone like that in the States who are in the same time zone, well, particularly with Paladin. And having weekly discussions with these guys, we have a very, although they do not give away their timing. In fact, they don't know the timing, to be quite honest. And COVID certainly threw them a bit because they're all working at home. But it gives us a lot of confidence that we're in the running. Let's put it this way, because when you look around the space, you go, well, who can really be in production the first half of this decade? Who really can be there? And there's not a lot. There really aren't a lot, right? So, and they know that. On the last half of the decade, the Fijians, the next gens, they'll start coming in. But first half of the decade, by 2025, there just aren't a lot of players who can be back in production.
No, I agree with you. It'll be interesting. Say we've got our views on who the gonna be versus the wannabes that are. But that's not to say there's not a game to be played in the markets at the moment with equities doing what they're doing. But look, Mike, I better wrap it up there because you've given us enough of your time today. I do appreciate it. Come on and see us more regularly. Now you've got some cash. Now you start doing some stuff. Let's do that, okay?
Yeah, we will. So I promise you, Will. I miss seeing you in person. I've really enjoyed our interviews, and I promise I'll be back a lot sooner, Matt.